Another situation that is statistically anomalous for people to encounter, and I know you've done so many videos on this on the Mike Force page or just even on your YouTube channel, and it's something that I know people worry about, and it's active shooters. How would you recommend that people prepare for or even act if they encounter an active shooter situation? I know there are so many variables from distance to what they may have on them from an EDC perspective, but what would be your overarching perspective on that?
Well, let me give you an interesting statistic since we were talking about first aid to bridge this. I was pretty alarmed by this, and you might even be alarmed by this. I don't think I've told you this before. A surgeon once told me in the United States, and this is very recently, that 90+% of active shooting victims are shot in the torso, not the extremity. And I had to take a step back because I've been teaching extremity stopping of the bleed forever.
Yeah.
Because in combat, we do a lot of that. And the reason we do a lot of that is because we wear body armor. So you take a couple on the plate, you take a couple on the arm, and then you have to manage that bleed. But civilians don't wear body armor. And likely because the active shooter is moving very rapidly, potentially under stress, they're just shooting center mass. And when they do that, they're putting rounds in the upper torso, which is causing several issues, including bleeding in the chest, attention pneumothorax, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Everybody will carry a tourniquet, but very few people will carry a chest seal or know the protocol how to needle decompress. I mean, the first time I needle decompress somebody wasn't in combat, was actually on the streets of Fayetteville, North Carolina, when I was behind a buddy who got in a vehicle accident, and I had to put a chest seal on him and then needle decompress him in the middle of the street. I would say there's definitely a protocol in first aid on person to make sure you manage your stopping of the bleed, but understanding an active shooting is likely to be a mass casualty event. Outside of that, we have our own protocol for active shooter, which is very different than the government protocol. The government protocol is run, hide, fight. We know how run, hide, fight, for example, worked at Virginia Tech in 2011 when 30 plus people were killed in that school by one shooter with.
And I want to add to that. Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're about to say it. And I want to add to that. That was by two pistols. I believe one was a 22 and one was a 9mm. And oftentimes, if not most of the time, people use an active shooter situation to bring into the conversation an AR platform type rifle, which stands for Armalite rifle, not assault rifle, for people's edification. The most catastrophic mass shooting we've ever had in this country was by pistols. And I think that's important for people to remember.
Yeah, that's super important because it had little to do with a particular platform and more to do with the psychology and the tactics that were utilized by the shooter whose name was Sam Cho. Now, when he went into the school, the first thing he did is he locked the doors with chains and locks and prevented anybody from escaping. If they followed the protocol, which I'm based on the information that I've read on the case study, very in depth, I'm one to believe that the teachers enacted the protocol, which was run, hide, fight. When they did so, they had nowhere to run. So we checked that block. Where are they hiding? Anybody who hides doesn't hide in a position to fight. They hide in a position to hide. So they're getting small. They're getting underneath things, which prevents them from being able to react appropriately to potentially fight for their life. 90+% of the people who were shot and killed were shot in the head while they were cowering in fear, hovering their hands over their head in some capacity, and were shot. His SOP was to walk into a room, shoot each and every individual student that was hiding underneath their desk. Then he walked into the hallway, reloaded, and then he repeated the process. That whole entire deal for him didn't take a lot of time before he killed himself, before the SWAT entered the actual room. And it's very unfortunate. But when you look at that protocol, just like we understand emergency procedures, where protocols like that come from, we are trying to reduce the amount of time it takes for somebody to cognitively process information, and we want them to react. Just like a fighter pilot doesn't have time to think things over and go through analysis, he has to react based on the symptoms. So if we just take that for a second, when you're running, what direction are you running? Have we put in any information that we have a protocol for where to run? When we hide, where are you hiding? When you fight, how are you fighting? So in our acronym, it's observe, fight, and flee, or flee and fight inversely. And the reason that is because you have to assess important information. When you observe and you're taking in information, it's like, oh, he's down the hallway on the right. So obviously, I need to, as a protocol, flee, but I need to go the opposite potential direction, because the further I am off the X, the more likely I am to survive. In the flee and flight capacity, I need to always be moving. I don't need to, curiosity killed the cat. I don't need to be investigating what's going on. I needed to be displacing. Most of the students of Virginia Tech that survived did so because their teacher allowed them to escape through the window. They crashed through the window and they were jumping down even from the second story of that particular floor. And that's what allowed them to survive, by getting away from the situation. And those that fought were actually at a higher rate of survival than those that didn't, because those that fought, despite some of them dying and getting shot through the door even and paying with their life, a teacher who was a World War II veteran, a young man who was pushing the door and preventing them from entering, certainly prevented life, but they paid for it with their own lives, but they died fighting. Anybody who didn't fight and who was hiding certainly perished. So having a protocol to fight, what does that mean? What means when I'm hiding, if I get into a position to hide, maybe I'm not necessarily putting my hands over my head and getting underneath a desk or in a closet. Maybe I am positioning myself to potentially fight. Now, this is a 2-hour podcast that I've done before on the education of this. We're just talking kind of high level. There's certain principles that we have to follow, but I think run, hide, fight as a protocol is a very poor protocol.
Do you know who actually created that particular protocol, the run, hide, fight?
It was a government study. I don't know the particular person that did it, but it was a government study that was done on active shooting. And generally speaking, it was law enforcement agencies and buy-in with government approval processes that allowed that protocol to become what it is.
Interesting.